Welcome back to our special Politics by Faith, the next generation. Great 1-2 punch here. First Adam Coleman, now there's no one better than Delano Squires. He's a research fellow of life, religion, and family at Heritage, and also contributor at The Blaze. Delano, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
Good, doing great.
Good.
We're talking about the golden era today, and one of the aspects of the golden era needs to be the strengthening of families and intentionally raising kids to be men and women of virtue. That's our thesis here. First of all, what are your thoughts on that? And what would you say, how would you best characterize the state of families and children today?
I think that's a great way to think about the golden era, particularly the golden era of family life, right? Living in a good country has to be more than just living in a country where economic activity is booming. That's a good thing, obviously. But if families are falling apart, it doesn't really matter how much economic growth we have if the home is in shambles. So I think that's a good way to frame it. And part of that is parents pouring in their values into their children so that, virtue and decency and honor can be passed on from one generation to the next. My concern is that American family life is not looking as good as it could be, and certainly as it should be. And I think there's stats to back that up. And I'm hoping that we are in a moment where we can find some bipartisan consensus that, the family itself, family structure, the institution of marriage and family should be something that both sides of the aisle should agree to focus on.
Yeah, I think we're now at the point, I think a lot has been said, and more can be said, about the state of it today and the stats and the numbers. But I think we get it. I think everyone's like, oh yeah, this is a problem. But man, what do we do to fix it? And just my instinct, if it's my conservative instinct or what, is like, oh, it's a personal responsibility issue, not like a big government issue. Although surely there's a role to play. I don't, like, how do you come at it? From what angle do you come at the solution?
Well, I think before we get to prescription, we need diagnosis. And right now, if I had to put it, succinctly, if America had a family model, right, in generations past, it was early and often. So people got married at younger ages and the marriage rate was higher. Today, it's less and later. So not only is the marriage rate down, but people are also getting married later in life. So for context, in 1980, the median age at first marriage was about 24 for a man, 22 for a woman. Today, it's 31 and 29 respectively. And I think those numbers are going to continue to go up. And the reason is because we just have a different marriage model. Social scientists will sometimes refer to the cornerstone model of marriage, where people get younger. The marriage itself serves as a foundation for people to build a life together, right? So we finish school together. We start our careers together. We purchase our homes together. We have children together. And now we've shifted to the capstone model, where marriage comes after both men and women have achieved several personal and professional goals. And that's one of the reasons why you see the age of first marriage, increasing over generations. So my concern is that if we don't do something about this as a culture, we're going to have the tombstone model, where people are getting married where they have more life behind them than they have in front of them, which obviously is going to impact whether they have children or the number of children they have. But it's also going to impact, whether adults today ever become grandparents, right? If I get married at 37 and have my first child at 40, and I have a son, and he follows in my footsteps, married at 37, first child at 40, I become a first-time granddad at 80 years old, right?
Mm.
Which is at least a couple years older than the average lifespan for an American male. So I don't think we're really thinking about this in sort of a comprehensive way, in the comprehensive way that we should. But it is a sign that the family is in a state of decline. Now, how do we address it? I think if we want to save the home, we need to get 4 houses in order. It's the church house of religion, right? It's the schoolhouse in terms of education. It's the state house in terms of government and public policy. And then it's the art house in terms of, media and entertainment. So each of those houses plays a role, I believe, in encouraging marriage and family, and doing so in a way where people don't feel that they have to have every single thing in their life completely in order before they can take on the responsibilities of having a spouse and starting a family.
Okay, I love all of that. I agree with all that. That's brilliant. Let me push back. Who's to say, Delano, that the Keystone model is better? Sure, that's what it's always been, but maybe it's out of necessity. Now we don't need that anymore. Now I can do it on my own, and I can do all these things, and I can get the job, and I can get the house on my own, and it's all good. Who's to say that what was is better? Maybe now what's to come is even better.
And I've heard that, and one of the things I was saying in response is that all change is not progress, right? So I would respond in part on a societal level, right? So sometimes you'll hear, particularly conservatives, talk about declining fertility rates, and replacement rate is 2.1 children per woman. And that is how a society, that is the minimum rate that a society needs to basically ensure that one generation replaces the next, which is the most fundamental job of every generation, is to propagate itself so that we'll have, children, and there'll be a country and a civilization around, after we're long gone. So part of it is a societal issue. Part of it is certainly a cultural issue, right? Societal in a different way, where the me first attitude, I can do it all on my own, particularly when it comes to family, is one of the reasons why we have both a declining marriage rate and an increasing out of wedlock birth rate. So for context, in 1960, about 5% of children were born to unmarried parents. Today, it's 40% of American children are born to unmarried parents, and about 1/4 of American children live with one parent, typically a single mom, which is the highest rate, I believe, in the world. So it's not good for society, for civilizational purposes. It's not good for society in terms of for children being raised typically without a dad, right? If it's a single parent home. And I also don't think it's good for the members of the household. So it's not good for kids, right? It's not good for single moms, because they're having to carry the burden that is typically and should be split across two parents, and they're having to carry all of them by themselves. And it's not good for men, because marriage is the natural habitat for men. It's where men live longer, they eat better, right? They have people around them who care about them. Family gives a man a sense of purpose. It gives him something to do with his life that's higher than himself. So I don't think our newfangled ideas about how to form families are working for anyone in the household. And that's why I think it's something that we should address sort of culturally and societally as a nation.
Yeah, I don't know if my next question is more art house related or church house related or all four. But how do we stop the casual sex that is going on in our country? Because I imagine that out of wedlock birth rate, probably that's mostly the results of just sleeping around all the time. Like eventually you're going to get pregnant, right? I don't know how much of that's like intentional. What do we do with this? Because we have this assumption that, well, of course kids are going to have sex all the time, constantly, forever. And you're like, I don't think we have to do that all the time, actually. How do we address this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I certainly would start in the church house with that one, right? Where religious leaders, and I'm thinking particularly churches and pastors, need to declare two things at one time. One is that sex is good. It's created by God, God ordained. And two is that it is created specifically for within the context of marriage. Obviously, you can have sex outside of marriage, but when I think about sex, I think about it in terms of fire, not just in terms of the fires of passion, but think about it this way. Fire can heat the home, fire can cook your food, but if the fire gets out of the fireplace and just into the middle of your house, you're going to have trouble. And in the same way, when sex is taken out of its rightful context, you're going to have trouble. The notion that sex can be or ever will be casual is one of the most destructive ideas to ever sort of take root in our culture. Hookup culture is not serving anyone. It's certainly not serving the women who oftentimes develop, feelings for these men. It's not serving men, right, who sort of bounce from one woman to the next, never creating any deep sort of emotional bond, and then think after they're done sowing their wild oats in their 20s that when they get married in their 30s, that they'll have no problem staying, committed to one woman, and that's just real women. We're not even talking about the impact of pornography at this point, and it's not good for kids who are talked about as the quote unquote consequence of sex, as opposed to the natural fruit of reproduction, right? So this is, I think this is a big issue. It's one that neither side probably wants to take on because, the sex outside of marriage is something that's probably a bipartisan thing at this point. But one of the benefits of potentially seeing the age of first marriage come down, right, is that young people and young adults have just less time to engage in these casual encounters. So, because again, if you are a man or a woman, you're getting married in your early 20s, let's say 24 for a man and 22 for a woman, even if you start dating at, 16, 17, 18, right, you just have a lot less time to rack up the types of, casual encounters that you get if you start at 18 and don't get married until you're 35 years old. So I think part of this is, declaring that marriage is good, it has value, right? Letting young people know that they can get married earlier than they think. Declaring that there's an ideal sequence to family formation. So it's marriage before carriage, all right? Letting people know that marriage is a permanent covenant union, not a temporary contract of convenience. And then letting the culture know that having more than 2.1 children is allowed, right? So that's how you get to, in that way, we address value, sequence, timing, permanence, and size, which I think are the five heartbeats of a healthy family culture.
So grateful you've thought deeply about this. We've got about 30 seconds. Is there any statistic or anything you see, anecdotally, whatever, that makes you think the kids are okay? Like, are we in any positive trajectory sign at all that we can build off of?
I think one of the few things that I've seen is that children raised in sort of religious context are doing better. I think families and men and women who hold to their faith traditions are still forming families and still having children, and for that, I think that is a sign of hope. The difficulty is that close to a third of American adults identify as none, so they don't practice any particular religion, and that's not even talking about the people who just identify with religion but just are casual observers or practitioners. So my hope is that we have a spiritual reformation in this country that pushes people back to God's, ordained and creation plan for marriage and family.
Amen. Delano Squires, thank you for your ministry, Delano. Well done. Where can people follow you?
Well, I try to stay out of trouble on X, but not very successfully. So they can follow me on X at Delano Squires, all one word.
Please keep up the great work, brother. Very grateful.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
He's a research fellow, Life, Religion, Family at Heritage, and The Blaze, of course. Delano, thank you.